The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, Earth Standard Time. Admiral Chen Wei stood in the communications center of Geneva Station, watching the translated text scroll across the holographic display. Around him, diplomats and scientists held their breath. Application status denied glowed in red letters at the top of the document. Chen Wei was 63 years old. He had fought in the resource wars, commanded the first mission to Alpha Centauri, and watched humanity take its first steps into a universe that turned out to be crowded with life. Nothing in his long career had prepared him for the feeling in his chest as he read the Galactic Concordate's response. "Insufficient for participation," he read aloud. His voice echoed in the suddenly quiet room. "Species classification, developmental. Technological level, primitive. Resource value, minimal. Strategic importance, none." Director Yuki Tanaka stepped forward. She was younger than Chen, barely 40, but her eyes looked ancient in that moment. "What does the rest say?" Chen scrolled down. "They suggest we reapply in 500 years, maybe 1,000. They say we need time to mature as a species." He paused. "They say our location in the Orion Spur makes us irrelevant to galactic trade routes." Ambassador Marcus Dupree, representing the United Earth government, slammed his palm against the table. "Irrelevant? We've achieved faster than light travel. We've built stations around 3 different stars. We've mapped 50 solar systems." "They've mapped 50 million, Tanaka said quietly. "I've read the data they sent with the rejection. The Concordate has been meeting for 200,000 years. They have 847 member species. Some of them were building space stations when humans were still learning to make fire." The room fell silent again. Outside, the windows of Geneva Station Earth hung like a blue marble against the black. Chen Wei had always thought it was the most beautiful sight in the universe. Now it just looked small. "So what do we do?" someone asked. Chen Wei straightened his uniform. "We send an observer delegation anyway. We ask to attend the meetings. We don't need to vote or participate. We just need to be there, to learn, to show them we're serious." Over the next 10 years, Earth tried everything. They sent their best diplomats to Concordate space. They offered trade agreements, scientific exchanges, cultural programs. They built an embassy station at the coordinates the Concordate had provided, a beautiful structure of steel and glass that took 5 years to complete. No one came to visit. When Earth's delegation arrived at the first Galactic Council meeting, they weren't invited to. Security forces stopped them at the border. The aliens were polite but firm. The meeting was for members only. Earth was not a member. "Please turn your ships around," Ambassador Dupree tried to explain. They weren't asking to vote. They just wanted to observe, to learn, to understand. The security commander, a being that looked like a floating crystal cluster, expressed what the translator called sympathetic regret. Rules were rules. The Concordate had procedures. Earth could reapply in 500 years. The human delegation returned home with nothing. They tried again the next year, and the year after that. For 15 years, Earth sent representatives to every major Galactic Council meeting. For 15 years, they were turned away at the door. Chen Wei retired after the 8th rejection. He gave a speech at his retirement ceremony that was broadcast across all of human space. "They think we don't matter," he said. "They think we're too young, too primitive, too far from the center of things. Maybe they're right. But I want every human being to remember this feeling. Remember what it's like to be dismissed, to be ignored, to knock on a door that never opens." He paused, looking out at the crowd. "Because someday, somehow, we're going to make them remember us." Yuki Tanaka took over Chen Wei's position. She was harder than he had been, colder. The rejections had changed her. On her first day as Director of Galactic Affairs, she called a meeting of Earth's top scientists and military leaders. "We're going to stop asking," she announced. "We're going to stop sending delegations to meetings we're not invited to. We're going to stop trying to be what they want us to be." "So we give up?" asked General Martinez. "No," Tanaka said. "We disappear. We go silent. We pull back inside our own borders, and we work. We study. We build. And we never, ever let them see what we're doing. That sounds like preparing for war, Martinez said carefully. Tanaka smiled, but there was no warmth in it. That sounds like preparing to matter. The silence began in 2362. Earth recalled all its diplomatic missions. The embassy station was abandoned, left as a ghost in space. Human ships stopped traveling to concordant borders. The few human traders who had managed to do business in alien markets came home. From the outside, it looked like humanity had given up, like they had accepted their place as an irrelevant species in a corner of the galaxy that nobody cared about. Inside human space, something else was happening. Every university on Earth and its colonies focused on one question: how do we catch up to species that have had a 200,000-year head start? The answer they found was simple and terrible. They couldn't. Not by following the same path. The concordant species all use the same basic technologies, Dr. Sarah Okonkwo explained at a research conference on Mars. She was 25 years old, brilliant, and angry in the way only young people who've been told they don't matter can be angry. They share knowledge. They trade designs. They've been using the same fundamental approaches to faster-than-light travel for 50,000 years, just refined, improved versions of the same engine. So we can't catch up by copying them, someone said. Exactly. We need to find completely different solutions, technologies they never thought of because they already had something that worked. Sarah brought up a hologram of a standard concordant FTL drive. This works by creating a bubble that slips between dimensions. It's elegant, it's reliable, it's also slow by the standards of what physics might allow. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we stop trying to understand their technology and start ignoring it. We start from scratch. We look at the problems they solved and find completely different answers. It was risky. It might waste decades. But Earth had already been wasting decades trying to be accepted. At least this way, they'd be wasting time on their own terms. The research programs began. Humanity poured resources into dozens of different approaches. Most of them failed. Some of them failed spectacularly, in ways that destroyed entire research stations and killed brave scientists. But some of them worked. In 2380, a team working in the asteroid belt discovered quantum cascade mathematics. It was a way of layering multiple faster-than-light fields on top of each other, each one pushing reality a little further. The first test ship traveled from Earth to Alpha Centauri in 6 hours instead of 6 days. The concordant standard drives would have taken 4 days. Humanity had just achieved something in 18 years that the entire galactic concordant hadn't managed in 200,000. They didn't tell anyone. In 2391, Dr. Ravi Krishnamurthy made a breakthrough in consciousness technology. He discovered that human neural patterns could be transmitted faster than light, without the degradation that plagued concordant communication systems. Within 5 years, humanity had built the network, a system that linked minds across light years. A human on Earth could share thoughts, feelings, even sensory experiences with someone in the Alpha Centauri system, instantly. The concordant used text and video communications with minutes or hours of delay. Again, humanity told no one. In 2403, teams working in the Oort cloud managed something that seemed impossible. They nudged a brown dwarf star into a different orbit using controlled gravity pulses. It was just an experiment, a proof of concept. It was also the first time humanity had moved a star. Yuki Tanaka, now in her 70s, watched the reports flood in. Every year brought new breakthroughs. Every year, humanity pulled further ahead in technologies the concordant had never dreamed of. Why haven't they checked on us? Asked General Martinez, now retired but still advising the government. 50 years of silence. Aren't they curious? Tanaka shook her head. Why would they be? We were irrelevant 50 years ago. Nothing we could do in 50 years would make us relevant by their standards. Species that were building pyramids when they first visited them are just now achieving basic spaceflight. They think in geological timescales. So they've forgotten us. Completely. Martinez was quiet for a moment. Are we really going to do this, Yuki? What we've been planning. She looked at him with those ancient eyes. They dismissed us. They made us knock on their door for 15 years and never let us in. They made every human being feel small and worthless and irrelevant. She stood up, walking to the window. Outside, Construction drones were building something massive in orbit. Yes, Marcus, we're really going to do this. It might start a war. It might end one before it starts. The final pieces came together in 24/47. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo, now 45 and commanding humanity's newest fleet, reviewed the plan one last time. It was audacious. It was dangerous. It was possibly insane. It was also beautiful. The Concordate's 1000th council meeting is in 6 months, she said to her senior staff aboard the flagship Prometheus Unbound. They're planning a celebration. All member species will attend. It's going to be the biggest gathering in their history. Perfect timing, said Commander Liu. Maximum audience. Maximum risk, countered Commander Ibarra. If this goes wrong, we're not just embarrassing ourselves. We're painting a target on every human world. Sarah nodded. I know. But we've been painted as irrelevant for 100 years. I'd rather be feared than forgotten. She pulled up a star chart. It showed 50,000 stars across 10,000 light-years of space. Every single one had been seeded with humanity's newest technology over the past 20 years. Ships moving at quantum cascade speeds invisible to Concordate sensors, planting devices in secret. Are we sure this will work? Someone asked. Dr. Krishnamurthy's team has run the simulations 10,000 times, Sarah answered. Synchronized stellar manipulation across that distance using the consciousness network. It'll work. And the message? Already programmed. They'll know it's us. They'll know we did this deliberately, and they'll know that we're not asking for permission anymore. Yuki Tanaka, now 93 years old and confined to a wheelchair, was brought to Geneva Station for the final authorization. The entire United Earth government was present. This was a decision that would define humanity's future. Director Tanaka, the president said formally. You've led our Galactic Affairs Division for 70 years. You were there when they first rejected us. What do you recommend? Tanaka's hands shook slightly as she gripped the arms of her wheelchair, but her voice was steady. For 100 years we knocked on their door. For 100 years they told us we didn't matter. They were wrong. But they'll never realize they were wrong unless we show them. This could be seen as an act of aggression. Everything humanity does from this point forward will be seen as something, Tanaka said. We can be forgotten or we can be remembered. There is no middle ground anymore. The vote was unanimous. 6 months later, the Galactic Concordate gathered for their 1000th council meeting. 1,200 species sent representatives. They discussed trade routes and resource allocation. They celebrated their long history of cooperation, and then every sensor in Concordate space registered an impossible anomaly. 50,000 stars spread across half the galaxy began to pulse with synchronized light. The pattern was unmistakable, artificial, and completely beyond anything the Concordate thought possible. In that moment, everything changed. In that moment, humanity stopped being irrelevant. In that moment, the galaxy realized they had made a terrible mistake by leaving one species alone with nothing but time and determination. The message decoded from the stellar pulses was simple. You forgot to invite us. We noticed. The years between 2397 and 2447 would later be called the Century of Ascension, though at the time, nobody outside human space knew it was happening. Inside human borders, every man, woman, and child understood that they were part of something historic. They were building not just new technology, but a new future. Chen Wei died in 2405 at the age of 123. Medical advances had given him extra decades, but even those couldn't last forever. On his deathbed, surrounded by former students and colleagues, he asked one question. Did we do it yet? Yuki Tanaka held his hand. Not yet, old friend. But soon. Good, Chen Wei whispered. His eyes were distant, remembering. I want them to know. I want them to understand what they lost when they closed their door. They will, Tanaka promised. I swear it. After Chen Wei's death, Tanaka commissioned a memorial station in the Oort cloud. It was built around one of humanity's first stellar manipulation platforms, a massive structure that could reach across light years and touch the hearts of stars. On the dedication plaque, they inscribed his final words. Make them understand what they lost. Every human who worked on the project after that understood their mission wasn't just about technology or power. It was about proving that every species, every person, every voice mattered. Sarah Okonkwo entered the military academy at 17. She was part of the first generation born after humanity went silent, children who grew up knowing that the galaxy had rejected Earth. For them, the isolation wasn't a tragedy. It was just reality. "My parents told me stories about the embassy station," Sarah said during her entrance interview, "about the beautiful building we made hoping someone would visit, about how it just floated there empty, while the galaxy had parties we weren't invited to." "Does that make you angry?" asked the interviewer. Sarah smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "No, sir. It makes me motivated." She graduated top of her class in 2410. By then, humanity's military had transformed from a defensive force into something else entirely. They weren't preparing to defend Earth from alien invasion. They were preparing to ensure the galaxy couldn't ignore them anymore. Dr. Ravi Krishnamurthy was different from most scientists. He didn't care about weapons or engines or power. He cared about connection. "We're alone out here," he told his research team in 2385. "Humanity is scattered across dozens of star systems. We need to find a way to bring us back together." The Concordat used quantum Ansible technology for communication. It was fast, reliable, and had a maximum range of about 5 light-years before signal degradation became a problem. For their purposes, it was fine. They had relay stations everywhere. Humanity couldn't build relay stations in Concordat space. They needed something better. Ravi approached the problem differently. Instead of sending information through quantum entanglement, what if they sent it through something else? Something that already connected humans across any distance? Consciousness. His early experiments were terrifying. Test subjects reported feeling other people's thoughts bleeding into their own. Some went temporarily insane. 3 committed suicide, unable to separate their own minds from the echoes of others. Ravi almost gave up. But then a test subject named Maria Chen, a distant relative of the Admiral, figured out the key. "Stop fighting it," she told him. "The problem isn't that we're connected. The problem is we're trying to stay separate." She was right. Once humans learned to accept the connection, to flow with it instead of against it, everything changed. The network was born. Humanity's collective consciousness, spanning light years, accessible by anyone who wanted to join. The Concordat had faster-than-light communication. Humanity had faster-than-light understanding. In 2415, teams of engineers completed the first quantum cascade drive large enough for a warship. The test flight was witnessed by thousands of humans both in person and through the network. Captain James Park piloted the vessel, a sleek destroyer called the Defiant. "Engaging quantum cascade," Park reported. His words echoed not just through radio, but through the minds of everyone connected to the network. The ship didn't just jump to faster-than-light speed. It cascaded through layers of reality, each layer pushing it faster. By the time it reached Alpha Centauri, it had achieved speeds 50 times faster than standard Concordat drives. The journey took 4 hours. A Concordat ship would have taken over a week. "We're not just catching up," Park reported, his excitement bleeding through the network so that thousands of humans felt it simultaneously. "We're ahead. We're actually ahead!" But speed wasn't enough. Humanity needed more. They needed power. They needed to make a statement so dramatic that the galaxy couldn't look away. The stellar engineering projects began in 2420. Small teams, working in the deep dark between stars, started experimenting with ways to manipulate stellar matter. They learned to create gravity wells, to redirect solar winds, to pulse the fusion reactions at a star's core. It was Dr. Margaret Osei who first suggested using stars as communication devices. "Think about it," she told the Research Council. "Every species with telescopes can see stars. If we could make them flash in patterns, send messages written in light across the galaxy, it would take incredible precision." Someone objected. "We'd need to coordinate devices across thousands of light years, all timed perfectly." "We have the network," Ravi Krishnamurthy pointed out. "Instant coordination across any distance. We can do this." The Starspeak project launched in 2425. Over 20 years, human ships equipped with quantum cascade drives planted stellar manipulation devices around 50,000 stars. The ships were invisible to Concordat sensors, using new stealth technology that bent light around them. Nobody saw them. Nobody knew. In Concordat space, the humans had been forgotten. Occasionally, an academic would mention Earth in a historical context, the way one might mention any minor species that had made contact and then faded away. Most species did that. They'd reach for the stars, realize how big and old the galaxy was, and retreat to their home systems, content to be small. The Concordat assumed humanity had done the same. They were wrong. Sarah Okonkwo earned her first command in 2430, taking charge of a quantum cascade frigate called the Relentless. Her mission was to plant stellar manipulation devices in the outer regions of Concordat space, close to their core worlds but not close enough to be easily detected. She brought her ship to within 3 light-years of Concordat Prime, the capital station where the council meetings were held. They sat there for 6 hours, completely invisible to Concordat sensors, and planted 12 devices around nearby stars. "How does it feel?" asked her second-in-command, Lieutenant Commander Amara Ndlovu. "Being this close to the people who rejected us?" Sarah stared at the distant glow of Concordat Prime on the view screen. "It feels like justice," she said quietly. "They thought we didn't matter. Soon they'll learn exactly how much we matter." They returned to human space without incident. The Concordat never knew they'd been there. By 2440, the infrastructure was complete. 50,000 stars with manipulation devices. The entire human fleet equipped with quantum cascade drives and consciousness network coordination. A new generation of soldiers and scientists who had spent their entire lives preparing for a moment the galaxy didn't know was coming. Yuki Tanaka reviewed the reports with satisfaction. She was 86 years old now, her hair completely white, her face mapped with lines of determination and anger that had only deepened with time. "Are we ready?" asked her deputy, a young man named Hassan Rao who had been 5 years old when humanity went silent. "Almost," Tanaka said. "We need one more piece. We need the demonstration to be so overwhelming that they can't dismiss it, so impossible that they have to take us seriously." "The stellar cascade?" Hassan asked. Tanaka nodded. "We need to prove we can do more than just make stars pulse. We need to prove we can make them die, or live again." The team she assembled for this project was small and worked in absolute secrecy. Their mission was simple in concept, impossible in execution: take a dead star and bring it back to life. They chose a brown dwarf 40 light-years from Earth, a failed star that had never quite ignited. For 5 years they built massive gravity generators around it. They pumped in hydrogen from gas giants. They compressed and heated and pushed. In 2445, the brown dwarf ignited. For the first time in the history of the universe, a dead star began to burn. Humanity had learned to create suns. The test was witnessed through the network by every human alive. Billions of people felt the triumph, the awe, the terrible power of what they had achieved. A child on Mars asked her father, "Does this mean we're gods now?" Her father had been quiet for a long moment. "No, sweetie. It means we're not irrelevant." Admiral Sarah Okonkwo, now promoted to command of the entire human fleet, stood on the bridge of the Prometheus Unbound and looked at the schedule. The Concordat's 1000th council meeting was in 2 years. "We'll be ready," she promised Yuki Tanaka during their weekly network connection. "The council will have all 1,200 species present," Tanaka said. "It's their biggest celebration. They're proud of their history." "Good," Sarah said. "Pride comes before the fall. Are you sure you want to go through with this? There's still time to choose a different path, a gentler approach." Sarah was quiet. Through the network, Tanaka could feel her thoughts, her memories. A childhood spent knowing Earth wasn't welcome. Years of training, fighting, building. The faces of every human who had worked and sacrificed and sometimes died to make this moment possible. They had 100 years to choose a gentler approach, Sarah said finally. They had 100 years to open their door. To say welcome instead of insufficient. To see us as people instead of numbers on an assessment report. "So this is revenge?" "No," Sarah said. "This is a reminder. We're reminding them that everyone matters, that dismissing someone doesn't make them irrelevant. It just gives them time to become something you can't ignore." The preparations entered their final phase. Every human ship moved into position. Every stellar manipulation device was tested and retested. The message was programmed into the light patterns, a simple greeting in every Concordat language. Hassan Rao asked the question that others were thinking but afraid to voice. What if they respond with force? What if this starts a war we can't win? Yuki Tanaka smiled. She was 91 years old and she looked tired, but her eyes still burned with the same fire they had held for 7 decades. Then we'll lose. But we'll lose as a species that mattered. as a people who stood up and said, "We are here and you will acknowledge us." I'd rather die on my feet than live on my knees. In the final months before the demonstration, humanity did something unexpected. They started sending messages to other species like themselves, species the Concordat had rejected or ignored, species on the edges of known space that were deemed insufficient or irrelevant. The messages were simple. You are not alone. You are not forgotten. Watch the stars. Most didn't respond. Some thought it was a scam, but a small few, sent back messages of curiosity and hope. On the day before the demonstration, Chen Wei's great-granddaughter Admiral Lin Wei visited his memorial station. She was 35, a pilot with more combat awards than anyone in the fleet, though she'd never fought a real battle. "Tomorrow we do it," she whispered to his plaque. "Tomorrow they learn what they lost when they closed the door." She pressed her hand to the cold metal. Through the network, she could feel other humans doing the same at memorials across known space. Millions of hands touching monuments to the people who had lived through the rejection, who had felt the sting of dismissal. Tomorrow that sting would have an answer. Tomorrow the galaxy would look up and see 50,000 stars pulsing in perfect synchrony. Tomorrow, humanity would stop being a footnote in galactic history. Tomorrow everything would change. The countdown began. Across human space, people held their breath. They joined the network, connecting mind to mind so that every human would experience the moment together. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the Prometheus Unbound, watching the chronometer tick down. Her crew was ready. The fleet was ready. The devices were ready. Humanity was ready. "All ships report ready status," her tactical officer reported. "Network connection at 100%, said the communications officer. "Every human is linked." Sarah took a deep breath. "Execute on my mark. 3, 2, 1. Mark." Across 10,000 light-years of space, 50,000 devices activated simultaneously. Stars began to pulse. The light show had begun, and the Galactic Concordat, gathered for their celebration, was about to receive a message written in the language of stars themselves. The age of human irrelevance was over. Concordat Prime Station was a marvel of engineering that had taken 3,000 years to build. It floated in a specially stabilized region near the galactic core, where 1,200 different species had contributed their greatest architectural achievements. The result was beautiful chaos. A station that was part Crystal Palace, part organic growth, part mathematical perfection. Premier Voxylon walked through the Grand Assembly Hall, his 6 legs clicking against the polished stone floor. He was a Kethril, an insectoid species that had joined the Concordat 9,000 years ago. His chitin gleamed with ceremonial polish, and his compound eyes refracted the light from 1,000 glowing sculptures. "Everything is ready for tonight?" he asked his assistant, a floating jellyfish-like being named Quilm. "Yes, Premier. All 1,200 species have confirmed attendance. This will be the largest gathering in Concordat history." Quilm's translator gave its voice a pleasant musical quality. "We're expecting over 10,000 delegates." Voxylon felt satisfaction, an emotion that made his antennae quiver. 1,000 council meetings. 200,000 years of peaceful cooperation. It's worth celebrating. In another wing of the station, High Inquisitor Threnel floated in her water-filled chamber, reviewing security reports. She was Voreen, an aquatic species whose homeworld was entirely ocean. Her people had been Concordat members for 50,000 years, and Threnel herself had served as High Inquisitor for 300 years. Something bothered her about the security reports, though she couldn't identify what. Everything looked normal. No threats detected, all standard precautions in place, and yet her instincts, honed over centuries of protecting the Concordat, whispered warnings. "Run another scan," she ordered her security chief. A massive rock-like being called Mordros. "We've already run 17 scans," Mordros rumbled. "There's nothing out there." "Run another one anyway." The celebration began at sunset, though sunset was an arbitrary concept near the galactic core where multiple stars illuminated the region. Still, tradition mattered, and the Concordat honored traditions. As the designated evening began, delegates from 1,200 species gathered in the Grand Assembly Hall. They were magnificent in their diversity. There were beings made of crystal and beings made of gas, species that communicated through light, through smell, through the manipulation of gravity waves. Some were ancient, their civilizations older than Earth's sun. Some were relatively young, only joining the Concordat a few thousand years ago. All of them shared one thing. They had been invited. They belonged. Premier Voxelon stood at the central podium, his voice amplified through translation fields that reached every being in the hall. Friends, colleagues, fellow members of the Great Concordat.
We gather tonight to celebrate 1,000 council meetings.
1,000 opportunities to work together, to build together, to reach for the stars together. Applause rippled through the hall, expressed in 1,200 different ways. Chittering, humming, flashing lights, releasing pleasant scents. We are proof that different species can coexist, Voxelon continued. That cooperation is better than conflict, that together we are stronger than apart. More applause. The celebration was going perfectly. In her chamber, Threnel watched the gathering through security cameras. The 18th scan had just completed. Nothing. No threats. No anomalies. Just delegates celebrating. So why couldn't she shake the feeling that something was wrong? The speeches continued. Representatives from the oldest species spoke about the Concordat's humble beginnings, when only 15 species had gathered to form a trade alliance. Representatives from the newest members spoke about their gratitude for being welcomed into such a magnificent organization. Then, the lights went out. Not just in the hall, but everywhere on the station. Every light, every display, every glowing sculpture went dark simultaneously. For a moment, there was silence. Then, confused sounds from the delegates. Questions in a dozen different languages. Emergency lighting, Voxelon ordered. What's happening? The emergency lights flickered on, dim and red. His assistant Quilm was already checking systems. It's not a power failure. The power is fine. It's the lights themselves. They're being overridden by something. By what? I don't know. The override is coming from outside the station, from... Quilm's voice trailed off. Through its translucent body, Voxelon could see its internal organs pulsing with what he recognized as fear. From where? He demanded. From everywhere. From every star in range. Threnel was already mobilizing her security forces. I want a full system diagnostic. I want to know what's happening right now. Her security chief Mordros's voice was shaken. Something Threnel had never heard in 300 years of working with him. High Inquisitor, you need to see this. The main display activated, showing sensor data from across Concordat space. What Threnel saw made her blood run cold. Stars were changing. Not just a few. Not just in one region. 50,000 stars across 10,000 light years, all beginning to pulse in perfect synchronization. That's impossible, she whispered. It's happening, Mordros said. The lights in the assembly hall came back on, but they weren't normal lights anymore. They were displaying the view from outside the station, showing the night sky. Delegates watched in growing horror as the stars around them began to pulse in rhythm, bright then dim, all perfectly synchronized. What kind of natural phenomenon could do this? Someone asked. There is no natural phenomenon, said Dr. Kess, a crystalline scientist who had studied astronomy for 2,000 years. This is artificial. This is deliberate. Someone is making the stars do this. Who has that kind of power? Voxelon demanded. Which species? The pulses continued. They formed patterns, and those patterns formed something else. Data, information, a message. Every translation computer on the station began working simultaneously, decoding what the stars were saying. The message appeared on every display in every language the Concordat knew. You forgot to invite us, we noticed. Silence fell over the hall. The message was simple, clear, and impossible to misunderstand. Someone who had not been invited to the celebration was announcing their presence. Someone powerful enough to manipulate 50,000 stars across half the galaxy. Panic began to spread through the delegates. Questions shouted in hundreds of languages. Demands for explanations. Calls for security. Threnel was already working. Find the source. Find out who sent this message. Her team worked frantically. The stellar pulses were coming from manipulation devices that had been planted around the stars. Devices using technology that didn't match any known Concordat design. The message itself was being coordinated through some kind of faster-than-light network that her sensors couldn't even properly detect. I'm tracing the origin points, one of her analysts reported. The devices were planted over the past 20 years. The pattern suggests a species with faster-than-light travel, advanced stealth technology, and the ability to manipulate stellar fusion reactions. That's a very short list of species, Threnell said. Show me the locations. A map appeared showing the 50,000 affected stars. They formed a rough sphere around human space with the highest concentration near Earth and its colonies. Threnell's heart sank. She knew that name. She had been High Inquisitor for 300 years and her memory was long. Pull up the rejection files, she ordered. Search for Earth, human. The file appeared on her screen. Application date 2347, status denied. Reason, insufficient for participation. Technological level, primitive. Last contact 2362, she looked at the date. 2362, 85 years ago. 8.5 decades since the humans had last tried to make contact. What have they been doing for 85 years? She whispered. The answer was literally written in the stars above her. In the assembly hall, Premier Voxelan had restored order, barely. The stellar pulses were continuing, but they had shifted to a new pattern. Numbers, coordinates, a date and time. They want to meet, Dr. Kess translated. Neutral space, sector 447, 1 week from now. Who wants to meet? Someone shouted. Who is doing this? The stars pulsed again and new data appeared. This time it wasn't text. It was a technical readout. Sensor data showing the simultaneous manipulation of 50,000 stars, the energy requirements, the coordination needed. The message was clear. Whoever did this wanted the Concordat to understand exactly how much power they were demonstrating. Then came the signature. Simple, clear, impossible to miss. Humanity, Earth, the species you forgot. The hall erupted in chaos. Delegates argued, shouted, demanded explanations. The humans were supposed to be primitive. They were supposed to be irrelevant. They had been rejected almost a century ago. Voxelan's mind raced. The humans had been denied because they were technologically inferior. Their faster-than-light drives had been slow and inefficient. Their resource base had been minimal. They had been deemed centuries away from being able to contribute meaningfully to the Concordat. And now they were manipulating stars like toys. Threnell arrived in the assembly hall, her water-filled mobility suit allowing her to move through the air. We need to convene an emergency security council now. What do you know? Voxelan asked. I know that every military expert we have is looking at this demonstration and calculating whether we could defend ourselves if these humans decided to attack instead of talk. And I know that the answer they're giving me is terrifying. The Security Council convened in a sealed chamber. The highest-ranking military and scientific leaders from 24 species gathered to assess the threat. Let's start with the obvious question, said General Croth, a warrior from a reptilian species that had never lost a war. Could we have done this? Could the Concordat, with all our resources, manipulate 50,000 stars simultaneously? The scientific advisors conferred. Dr. Kess spoke for them. No, we don't have the energy generation capacity. We don't have the coordination systems. We don't even have the theoretical framework for how this would work. This is beyond us. How far beyond us? I would estimate we're seeing technology at least 500 years more advanced than our own. Possibly more. The council chamber fell silent. 500 years was a significant gap in a galaxy where most species improved their technology gradually over millennia. How is this possible? Admiral Torvin asked. She was Vixian, a species known for their strategic thinking. We rejected them 85 years ago. They were barely capable of basic FTL travel. How did they advance this far this fast? They didn't follow our path, Dr. Kess said quietly. Look at their technology. The stellar manipulation uses principles we've never even considered. Their coordination system isn't quantum ansible. It's something else entirely. They didn't try to copy us. They invented completely different solutions. Because they couldn't learn from us, Threnell said. Because we rejected them. Because we left them alone with nothing but time and motivation. Voxelan felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Fear. What do they want? They want to meet, Admiral Torvin said. The question is, do we go? If we don't go, they've already demonstrated they can reach any of our systems, General Croth pointed out. Those stellar manipulation devices are in our territory. They got past our security, planted devices around stars near our most important worlds, and we never noticed. If we do go, we're acknowledging their power, someone argued. We're legitimizing this display. I think, Threnel said carefully, that display is already legitimate. They don't need our acknowledgement. They manipulated 50,000 stars. In one moment, they demonstrated more technological capability than most concordate species have achieved in their entire histories. So what do we do? Voxelan looked around the table at the leaders of the greatest civilization in the known galaxy. For 200,000 years, the concordate had been the dominant power. They had been the ones who invited or rejected. They had held all the cards. Now a species they had dismissed as irrelevant was making the stars themselves dance. We go to the meeting, Voxelan said. We send a delegation. We find out what they want. And if they want war, then we hope they're more merciful than we were when we told them they didn't matter. The message went out to all concordate members. There would be a meeting in neutral space, Sector 447, in 1 week. A delegation would be sent to meet with the humans. All species were invited to observe. That night, across concordate space, citizens looked up at the sky and saw the pulsing stars. The display continued for 3 days, a constant reminder that everything had changed. Children asked their parents what the lights meant. Scientists scrambled to understand the technology. Military leaders reviewed defense plans and realized how inadequate they were. And in the archives, someone found the old rejection letter sent to Earth in 2347. They read the words, "Insufficient for participation. Technological level, primitive. Resource value, minimal. Strategic importance, none." The document was over a century old. Every word in it had been proven catastrophically wrong. On the 6th day, the stellar pulses stopped. The 50,000 stars returned to their normal luminescence. But everyone who had seen them knew the truth. The devices were still there. The power was still there. The humans had simply stopped showing off. The concordate prepared their fastest ships and their best diplomats for the meeting in Sector 447. They didn't know what to expect. They didn't know what the humans would demand. But they knew one thing with absolute certainty. The species they had rejected a century ago was about to teach them a very expensive lesson about the cost of dismissing someone as irrelevant. The galaxy would never be the same. Neutral Space Sector 447 was a region of empty void between territories claimed by no one. It was a place where civilizations met to negotiate, to trade, to resolve disputes without the weight of political borders complicating matters. The concordate had held thousands of meetings here over the millennia. None had ever felt like this. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the Prometheus Unbound and watched the concordate fleet arrive. There were hundreds of ships representing dozens of species, battleships that could crack planets, carriers that held thousands of fighters, dreadnoughts that had won wars against species humanity had never heard of. They brought half their military, Commander Liu observed. They're scared, Sarah said. Good. They should be. Behind the Prometheus Unbound, the human fleet waited in formation. There were only 50 ships, a tiny force compared to the concordate armada. But each human vessel was a work of art and terror, sleek black ships that seemed to drink in light rather than reflect it. They were built with quantum cascade drives, consciousness network coordination, and weapons that the concordate had never seen before. They were also completely invisible to concordate sensors until the moment Sarah decided to let them be seen. Should we decloak the rest of the fleet? Asked Commander Amara Ndlovu. Sarah shook her head. Not yet. Let them think this is all we brought. Through the network, she could feel the other human ships, their crews, their captains. She could sense their determination, their pride, their barely controlled anger at a century of dismissal. Every human in the fleet was connected, their minds linked in a way the concordate couldn't understand. They weren't just a fleet. They were a single organism with 50 bodies and thousands of minds. On the concordate flagship, Premier Voxelan watched the human ships through his view screen. He had brought Admiral Torvin, High Inquisitor Threnel, Dr. Kess, and representatives from the oldest and most powerful concordate species. Only 50 ships, General Croth noted. They're either very confident or very foolish. After what they showed us with the stars, Threnel said quietly, I don't think they're foolish. The Prometheus Unbound was enormous, easily twice the size of the Concordate's largest battleship. Its surface seemed to shift and move as if it wasn't quite fixed in normal space. Weapons ports lined its hull, but the energy signatures were wrong. using principles that concordate sensors couldn't classify. "I'm scanning their flagship," Dr. Kess reported. "The power output is—" "This can't be right. What is it?" Foxelan asked. "The reactor readings suggest they're generating more power than our entire fleet combined, from a single ship." The council chamber fell silent. Everyone was doing the math, calculating what that meant for weapons capacity, shield strength, and propulsion. The numbers were terrifying. "Open a communication channel," Foxelan ordered. His voice was steady, but his antennae trembled slightly. On the human flagship, Sarah received the communication request. "This is it," she said to her crew. "Everyone ready?" Through the network, 100,000 responses flooded back. Every human in the fleet, every person watching from Earth and the colonies, all of them ready. All of them connected, all of them speaking with one voice. "Open the channel," Sarah ordered. Foxelan's image appeared on the human view screen. Sarah's image appeared on the concordate screens. For a moment, both sides simply looked at each other, taking measure. Foxelan spoke first. "I am Premier Foxelan of the Galactic Concordat. We have come to discuss your demonstration." "Demonstration?" Sarah smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Is that what you're calling it?" "We thought of it as an introduction, a reminder, a way of making sure you remembered we exist. We never forgot about humanity," Foxelan said carefully. "Really?" Sarah's voice was cold. "Then perhaps you can explain why Earth's applications for Concordate membership were rejected. Why our delegations were turned away at your borders. Why for 15 years we knocked on your door and you told us we didn't matter." There was a long pause. Foxelan's translator struggled to convey the emotion in his reply. "Your rejection was not personal. It was a matter of procedure. Your species was young. Your technology was primitive by our standards. We have protocols. Your protocols dismissed us as irrelevant," Sarah said, "as insufficient, as not worthy of your time." She leaned forward. "How do you feel about those assessments now, Premier?" Before Foxelan could respond, Sarah raised her hand. "Let me show you something." The view screen changed. It displayed a star map showing a star system 50 light-years from their current position. In the center was a brown dwarf, a failed star that had never quite ignited. "This is system HD 34445, Sarah said. 3 years ago it was a dead system. Nothing but a brown dwarf that never achieved fusion." The image changed to show the brown dwarf surrounded by massive installations. Then in the recording, those installations activated. Energy poured into the brown dwarf. Its surface began to glow, brighter, hotter, and then it ignited. On the Concordate flagship, every being watched in stunned silence as humanity demonstrated stellar resurrection. A dead star brought to life through sheer force of technology and will. "We made a sun," Sarah said simply. "We took a ball of failed fusion and turned it into a living star. That's what we did with the time you gave us. That's what happens when you leave humans alone with nothing but determination and spite." Dr. Kess was frantically running calculations. The energy requirements? The precision needed. "This is beyond anything we've theorized," Sarah continued. "For 100 years we knocked on your door. For 100 years you told us we weren't good enough, weren't smart enough, weren't important enough." Her voice hardened. "We are no longer knocking. What do you want?" Threnel asked. She had been quiet until now, but she recognized the pattern. This wasn't just a demonstration of power. It was a negotiation, Sarah smiled. "Thank you for asking. We want several things. First, a formal apology from the Concordate for the century of dismissal. Second, full membership in the Galactic Council with all rights and privileges. Third, reparations for 100 years of exclusion from galactic trade and knowledge sharing." "That's not unreasonable," Foxelan said carefully. "We could agree to those terms." "I'm not finished," Sarah said. "Fourth, humanity will have oversight powers over all Concordate first contact protocols. No species will ever be dismissed as irrelevant again. No civilization will ever be turned away because they're young or small or inconvenient. You're asking for authority over our basic procedures." Admiral Torvin objected. "We're demanding it," Sarah corrected. "Because we've learned what happens when powerful civilizations decide who matters and who doesn't. We've lived the consequences of your arrogance." "And if we refuse?" General Croth asked. "His species didn't respond well to threats." Sarah's smile faded. "Then we'll show you what 100 years of anger can build." The view screen changed again. It showed a star map with 10,000 systems marked in red. Each one had a pulsing indicator, Over the past 20 years, Sarah explained, we've seeded 10,000 concordate systems with stellar cascade devices. They're dormant right now, but if activated, they would trigger chain reactions in those stars. The reactions would cascade, spreading to neighboring stars, then to their neighbors. Dr. Kess's voice was shaking. You're describing a cascading stellar collapse. The affected region would become uninhabitable. Billions would die. Trillions, Sarah corrected coldly. We've run the simulations. Full activation would make half of concordate space uninhabitable within a year. The council chamber erupted in chaos, shouting, demands, threats. Voxelon tried to restore order while Threnel worked frantically to verify the claim. Her sensors confirmed it. There were devices around stars throughout concordate space, thousands of them. You're threatening genocide, Voxelon said, his voice hollow. We're explaining consequences, Sarah replied. For 100 years you acted like we didn't exist. Like our voices didn't matter. Like we were so far beneath you that we weren't worth your time. She paused. Now you get to experience what it feels like to have your survival depend on someone else's mercy. Through the network, Sarah felt the responses from Earth. Some humans were cheering. Others were horrified. They hadn't known about the stellar cascade devices, about the plan to hold the galaxy hostage. Yuki Tanaka's voice came through Sarah's private connection. The old woman was 94 now, watching from Earth. Are you really going to do it, Sarah? Will you really trigger the cascade if they refuse? Sarah's internal response was carefully shielded from the public network. I don't know, Director, but they need to believe I will. Out loud, Sarah continued. However, let me be clear about something. Humanity doesn't want war. We don't want to destroy the concordate. What we want is to be heard, to be respected, to ensure that no species ever feels the way we felt when you closed your door. She gestured and the human ship's weapons powered up. Energy readings spiked across the concordate sensors. Every alien military officer watching understood they were looking at weapons that could probably destroy their entire fleet. But if you force us to choose between being dismissed and being feared, Sarah said quietly, we will choose fear. Every time. Voxelon looked at his advisors. Admiral Torvin was calculating military responses and finding none that didn't end in disaster. General Croth was reviewing the human fleet analysis and realizing they had underestimated humanity by orders of magnitude. Dr. Kess was still staring at the stellar resurrection data, understanding that humanity had achieved something the Concordate hadn't managed in 200,000 years. Threnel spoke quietly to Voxelon. We can't win a military conflict with them. Our technology is too far behind, and even if we could win, activating those cascade devices would make it a Pyrrhic victory at best. So we have no choice? Voxelon asked. We had a choice 100 years ago, Threnel replied. We chose to dismiss them. Now we live with the consequences of that choice. Voxelon turned back to the view screen, looking at Admiral Okonkwo's face. She was young for a human, probably not even 60. She hadn't been alive when the Concordate rejected Earth. This wasn't even her personal grievance. It was inherited anger, passed down from Chen Wei and Yuki Tanaka and all the humans who had felt the sting of dismissal. That made it more dangerous, not less. Personal anger could be reasoned with, bought off, appeased. Inherited anger was a philosophy, a principle, a way of seeing the universe. We need time to consider your demands, Voxelon said. You have 1 week, Sarah replied. Return here in 7 days with your answer. Accept our terms or face the consequences. And what guarantee do we have that you'll deactivate the cascade devices if we agree? Admiral Torvin demanded. Sarah laughed, a sound without humor. The same guarantee we had that you would treat us fairly if we followed your protocols. The same promise we had that knocking on your door would eventually lead to it opening. She leaned forward, which is to say none. You'll have to trust us, just like we had to trust you for 100 years. That's not acceptable, General Croth growled. Then don't accept, Sarah said simply. Refuse our terms. Try to fight us. See where it leads. She smiled again, that cold expression that didn't reach her eyes. But remember something, General. We're not asking for your extinction. We're not demanding you abandon your homes or give up your sovereignty. We're asking for an apology, a seat at the table, and a promise to do better. She paused. Compare that to what you gave us. Which was nothing. The communication ended. The view screen went dark on both sides. On the Prometheus Unbound, Sarah sat back in her command chair. Through the network, she felt the complex emotions of humanity. Pride at the demonstration, fear of what they'd become, hope for what might come next, and underneath it all the lingering pain of a century of rejection. Did we do the right thing? Commander Liu asked quietly. Sarah was silent for a long moment. I don't know. But we did what they forced us to do. They taught us that the only way to matter is to make yourself impossible to ignore. On the Concordat flagship, Voxilan called an emergency council meeting. Every species needed to vote on whether to accept humanity's terms. They're terrorists, General Croth argued. They're holding the galaxy hostage. They're victims who became powerful enough to demand justice, Threnel countered. There's a difference. The debate raged for hours. Some species wanted to fight, to refuse the human demands on principle. Others recognized the reality of their situation. The humans had demonstrated technological superiority. They had planted devices throughout Concordat space. They had the capability to follow through on their threats. More importantly, their demands weren't unreasonable. An apology, membership, oversight on first contact procedures. These were things the Concordat could provide without fundamentally changing their civilization. The alternative was unthinkable. As the week progressed, something unexpected happened. Messages started arriving at Concordat Prime from other species. The ones humanity had contacted. The ones who had also been rejected or ignored. We stand with Earth, read one message from a species called the Yithril. For 2,000 years we asked to join the Concordat. For 2,000 years we were told we weren't ready. Now we see that not ready just meant not convenient. More messages followed. Species that had been dismissed. Civilizations that had been told they didn't matter. Some supported humanity out of spite. Others out of hope that things might actually change. The Concordat realized they weren't just negotiating with one angry species. They were negotiating with every civilization they had ever dismissed, ignored, or underestimated. On the 7th day, both fleets returned to Sector 447. Voxilan opened the communication channel. His antennae were still, his posture formal. Admiral Okonkwo, the Concordat Council has voted. By a margin of 789 to 411, we accept your terms. Sarah kept her expression neutral, but through the network, every human felt the surge of triumph. All of them? She asked. All of them, Voxilan confirmed. The Concordat formally apologizes for its treatment of humanity. You will be granted full membership. Reparations will be negotiated, and you will have oversight powers over first contact protocols. And the Cascade devices? Threnel asked. Sarah smiled. For the first time, there was genuine warmth in it. We'll begin deactivating them immediately. They'll be removed within a year. You have my word. Why should we trust your word? General Croth demanded. Because unlike you, Sarah said quietly, we actually want to be part of this Concordat. We want to build, not destroy. We want cooperation, not domination. She paused. We just needed you to take us seriously first. The formal agreements would take months to finalize. But in that moment, in that empty sector of space, humanity stopped being the rejected species. They became the ones who taught the galaxy a lesson about the cost of dismissal. They became the ones who made the powerful remember that everyone matters. They became the species that changed everything. 1 year after the reckoning, as historians were already calling it, Earth held its first official Galactic Council meeting. The venue wasn't Concordat Prime, the traditional seat of power. It was Geneva Station, the same place where Admiral Chen Wei had read the rejection letter a century ago. The symbolism was deliberate and not lost on anyone. Yuki Tanaka, now 95 years old and requiring medical support to stay alive, insisted on attending. She sat in a specialized mobility chair, surrounded by doctors and with only months left to live. But her mind was still sharp. Her eyes still burned with that ancient fire, and nobody dared tell her to stay home. I need to see this, she had said. I need to see them walk through our door after we spent 100 years knocking on theirs. The delegates arrived over 3 days. Ships from 1,200 species, some friendly, some cautious, some openly hostile. They came because they had to, because refusing would mean admitting that humanity had won more than just a seat at the table. Premier Voxilan arrived first, a gesture of respect. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo greeted him personally at the docking bay. They stood facing each other, the insectoid alien and the human woman, representatives of two very different approaches to the galaxy. "Welcome to Geneva Station," Sarah said formally. Voxyland's translator conveyed something that might have been amusement or might have been resignation. "Thank you for the invitation, Admiral. It is ironic that we meet here." "Ironic?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "This is the station where we sent our rejection, is it not? Where we told humanity they were insufficient?" "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "This is exactly that place. We wanted you to remember. All of you." Other delegates arrived. High Inquisitor Threnel, floating in her water-filled suit. General Croth, still radiating disapproval but following orders. Dr. Kess, fascinated by human technology and eager to learn. Species after species, some powerful, some weak, some ancient, some young. All of them walking through humanity's door because humanity had made it impossible to do otherwise. The opening ceremony was held in a grand hall that humans had built specifically for this meeting. It wasn't as old as the halls on Concordat Prime. It didn't have thousands of years of history embedded in its walls, but it had something else. It had purpose. On every wall, holographic displays showed the history of humanity's relationship with the Concordat. The first contact, the application, the rejection, the years of trying, the silence, the demonstration, the negotiation. "We're not letting anyone forget," Yuki Tanaka had insisted during the planning. "Not in 1,000 years. Not in 10,000. Everyone who walks through that door needs to understand what brought us here." Sarah stood at the podium, looking out at the gathered delegates. 1,200 species, 10,000 beings. All of them here because humanity had forced them to pay attention. 101 years ago, Sarah began. Admiral Chen Wei stood in this station and read a message from the Galactic Concordat. The message said we were insufficient, primitive, irrelevant, that we should come back in 500 years, maybe 1,000, when we'd had time to mature. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. Every delegate knew this story. It had been told and retold across the galaxy. Chen Wei died believing that humanity would make you remember us. Director Tanaka, sitting here today, spent 70 years of her life working toward this moment. Millions of humans dedicated their lives to proving that we mattered. Sarah's voice hardened, and we did prove it. Though not in the way any of us expected. She gestured to the displays. We proved it by leaving the skies glowing, by making stars dance to our will, by showing you that dismissing someone doesn't make them irrelevant. It just gives them time to become something you can't ignore. In the audience, Voxyland shifted uncomfortably. He had spent the past year dealing with the political fallout of humanity's ascension. Some species respected the Concordat's decision to accept human terms. Others saw it as weakness, capitulation to threats. "But we didn't demand this meeting just to remind you of the past," Sarah continued. "We demanded it to build a better future, because we learned something in our century of exclusion. We learned what it feels like to be dismissed, and we decided that no one should ever feel that way again." She pulled up a holographic document. "This is the new First Contact Protocol, drafted by a joint Human Concordat Committee. It changes how the Concordat evaluates new species. No longer will civilizations be judged primarily on their technology or their resources. Instead, they'll be evaluated on their potential, their aspirations, their unique perspectives." "That's idealistic," General Croth growled. "The galaxy runs on practical considerations." "The galaxy ran on practical considerations," Sarah corrected. "And that led to centuries of species being told they didn't matter. Well, the galaxy has new practical considerations now, like the fact that dismissing someone might lead to them becoming powerful enough to reshape the political landscape." Dr. Kess raised a crystalline appendage. "Question, Admiral. You've shared some technology with us. The quantum cascade mathematics, some of the consciousness network principles, but not everything. When will humanity share the stellar manipulation technology?" Sarah smiled. "When we're confident it won't be used to repeat our mistakes. When we trust that the Concordat has learned the lesson we paid so dearly to teach." "So you're withholding technology?" Admiral Torvin asked. "Maintaining superiority through secrecy?" "We're being careful," Sarah replied. "We're not the naive species anymore that assumed good intentions and fair treatment. We're the species that learned that power matters, that fear can be a tool, that sometimes you have to hold the cards close to your chest." She looked around the room. "But we're also the species that chose mercy when we could have chosen revenge. We could have triggered those cascade devices. We could have made the Concordat pay in blood for every year of dismissal. We didn't. We asked for an apology, a seat at the table, and a promise to do better. You held trillions of lives hostage, Threnel pointed out quietly. Yes, Sarah agreed without hesitation. We did, because that's what you taught us. You taught us that power is the only currency that matters. That being right, being worthy, being deserving means nothing if you can't back it up with force. She leaned forward. So we became a force, and now we're using that force to make the galaxy a little more just. You're welcome. The meeting continued for 3 days. Debates about the new protocols. Arguments about technology sharing. Discussions about reparations and timelines and oversight procedures. It was messy and complicated and full of the kind of bureaucratic chaos that any large organization generates. But it was also historic. For the first time, the Concordat was adapting not because they wanted to, but because they had to. One species, dismissed as irrelevant, had forced the entire galaxy to change. On the second day, a small delegation arrived from the Yithral, one of the species that had sent support messages to Earth. Their representative, a being named Kethis, approached Sarah during a break. Thank you, Kethis said simply. Sarah was surprised. For what? For fighting. For refusing to accept their dismissal. For proving that small voices can become loud enough to be heard. Kethis gestured to the room full of delegates. The Yithral have been trying to join the Concordat for 2,000 years. Always we were told no, not yet, come back later. Now because of what you did, they're reviewing our application with new eyes. Sarah felt something complex in her chest. Pride certainly, but also responsibility. We didn't do this just for ourselves, she said. We did it for everyone who's ever been told they don't matter. We know, Kethis replied. That's why we're grateful. Over the next month, 16 species that had previously been rejected were granted Concordat membership. Some were actually ready for the responsibility, others frankly weren't. But the Concordat had learned that potential mattered as much as current capability, and that dismissing someone was more dangerous than giving them a chance. The Cascade devices were removed from Concordat space one by one. Human ships collected them openly, allowing Concordat observers to verify each retrieval. It was a gesture of good faith, though Sarah kept backups of the technology carefully secured in human space. Trust, but verify, she told her staff, and keep the ability to rebuild them if we need to. We earned their respect through fear. Let's hope we can keep it through cooperation. Yuki Tanaka died 4 months after the first Geneva Station meeting. She passed quietly in her sleep, surrounded by family and with the knowledge that her life's work had succeeded. Her funeral was attended by representatives from 300 species, including Voxelon himself. She never forgave us, Voxelon said to Sarah at the memorial service. No, Sarah agreed. She didn't. Forgiveness wasn't what she wanted. She wanted acknowledgement. She wanted you to understand the cost of your dismissal. Did we succeed in that? Sarah looked at the crowds gathered to honor a human they had never met, paying respects to a woman who had spent her life being angry at them. Yes, she said finally. I think you did. But Tanaka's legacy wasn't just the Concordat's changed attitude. It was also the memorial that humanity built, visible from every corner of space. On the anniversary of the stellar demonstration, humanity activated a new display. Not as dramatic as the original 50,000 pulsing stars, but permanent. They had seeded devices around 10,000 stars across the galaxy, chosen specifically because they were visible from the homeworlds of every Concordat species. Every night, at the same time, those 10,000 stars pulsed gently, just once, lasting only a second. But it was enough. It was visible. It was unmistakable. And it carried a message encoded in the light, repeating every night. Never again will the small be forgotten. Never again will potential be dismissed. We are watching. The glowing promise, people started calling it. A reminder written in the stars themselves. Some Concordat species found it threatening. Others found it reassuring. But everyone understood what it meant. Humanity was watching, and they would hold the galaxy accountable. Sarah Okonkwo eventually retired from military service and took a position as Earth's permanent representative to the Galactic Council. She was good at it, combining the diplomatic skills necessary for the position with a willingness to be blunt when needed. You're considering rejecting the Thalosian application? She asked during one council meeting, 5 years after Earth's admission. Their technology is primitive. Their resource base is minimal. Their location is strategically irrelevant. Sound familiar? The Concordat approved the Thalosian application. Earth also became something unexpected, a protector of weaker species. When the Concordat tried to enforce trade agreements that disadvantaged younger civilizations, Earth intervened. When powerful species tried to annex territory from less advanced neighbors, human ships appeared in orbit as a deterrent. We're becoming what we accused the Concordat of being, Commander Liu, now an admiral herself, pointed out. We're using our power to shape the galaxy. Yes, Sarah agreed. But we're using it to make things more fair, not less. We remember what it felt like to be powerless. We're making sure others don't have to feel that way. Some species resent us for it. Some species resented us when we were irrelevant too, Sarah said with a shrug. At least now we're resented for doing something good. The technology gap between humanity and the Concordat slowly narrowed. Earth shared some innovations, withheld others. The Concordat learned from humans but also continued developing their own approaches. Both sides benefited from the exchange, even if the relationship remained complicated. Dr. Ravi Krishnamurthy won the first joint Human Concordat Scientific Prize for his consciousness network technology. When he accepted the award, he said something that resonated across the galaxy. We built this technology because we were alone and needed to connect with each other. Now we're using it to connect with all of you. Sometimes the best innovations come from necessity. Sometimes being excluded forces you to find new solutions. So in a weird way, thank you for rejecting us. You made us better. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or feel guilty. They did both. On the 10th anniversary of the Reckoning, Geneva Station hosted another ceremony. This one was different. It wasn't about confrontation or demands. It was about reflection. An elderly Voxelon, his chitin now dull with age, stood at the podium. 10 years ago, humanity forced us to confront our mistakes. They did so in a way that was frightening and, I must admit, effective. Today, I want to do something we should have done a century ago. He turned to face the Earth delegation, looking directly at Sarah Okonkwo. I apologize. Not as Premier of the Concordat speaking official words, but as Voxelon, an individual who read Earth's application and checked the box marked denied. I saw your species, I evaluated you, and I dismissed you. I was wrong. The hall was silent. This was different from the official apology that had been part of the negotiated terms. This was personal. I told myself it was just procedure, Voxelon continued. Just following the rules. But rules are made by people, and we chose rules that made it easy to dismiss others. We chose convenience over compassion, efficiency over empathy. He paused. And we created an enemy when we could have made a friend. Sarah stood and walked to the podium. She and Voxelon faced each other, human and alien former adversaries. Thank you for saying that, Sarah said. It doesn't undo the past. It doesn't erase 100 years of dismissal. But it matters. Will humanity ever forgive the Concordat? Voxelon asked. Sarah considered the question carefully. I don't know. Maybe some will. Maybe some won't. But forgiveness isn't really the point, is it? The point is whether we can build something better together. Whether we can create a galaxy where no species has to do what we did to be heard. She looked out at the assembled delegates. We showed you our anger. We demonstrated our power. We forced you to take us seriously. But we didn't do it just for revenge. We did it because we believe the galaxy can be better than it was. That all of us working together can create something greater than any of us could alone. Even after everything? Threnel asked from the audience. Even after being rejected and dismissed? Especially after that, Sarah replied. Because we know what it costs to be excluded. We know the price of dismissal, and we've decided to use that knowledge to make sure others don't pay the same price. The ceremony ended with something unprecedented. Humanity revealed a new innovation. Temporary consciousness sharing for other species. Not as permanent or deep as the human network, but enough to allow different beings to briefly experience each other's thoughts and feelings. Voxelon volunteered to be the first non-human to try it. For 60 seconds, he was connected to Sarah's mind through the technology. He felt what she felt. He experienced echoes of the century of rejection, the anger, the determination, the hope. When the connection ended, Voxelon was shaking. I understand now, he said quietly. Not intellectually. Not as information. I understand it here. He touched his chest where his hearts beat. That's what we did to you. That's what we did to so many others. Yes, Sarah said simply. That's what you did. Remember it. Remember it every time you evaluate a new species. Remember it every time someone asks to be heard and you're tempted to say no. Over the following years, the consciousness-sharing technology became a tool for diplomacy and understanding. Species that had been enemies for millennia used it to actually understand each other's perspectives. Long-standing disputes were resolved when both sides could feel what the conflict meant to the other. Humanity's gift to the galaxy wasn't just technology or military power. It was empathy forced through connection. 30 years after the reckoning, a child on the Kethril homeworld looked up at the night sky and saw the gentle pulse of the glowing promise. The 10,000 stars flickered for 1 second as they did every night. "Parent Vox," the child asked, "why do the humans make the stars dance?" The adult Kethril, a grandchild of the original Voxilan, settled beside the child. "They do it to remind us of something important." "What?" "That everyone matters. That dismissing someone as small or irrelevant or insufficient is one of the worst things you can do, because you never know who will become strong enough to hold you accountable for that dismissal." Were the humans angry? Very angry. For a very long time. They had every right to be. Are they still angry? The adult considered this. I don't think so. Now they're watchful. They're making sure we never make the same mistake again, and they're helping others who were dismissed the way they were. The child watched the stars for a moment. "I like that they make them dance. It's pretty." "Yes," the adult agreed. "It is pretty. But it's also a promise, a threat, and a hope all at the same time. How can it be all those things? Because humans are complicated. They learned to be powerful, but they also learned to be kind. They could have destroyed us. Instead, they're protecting us. Even from ourselves." High above them, the stars continued their eternal dance, and somewhere in that vast darkness, humanity watched, remembered, and made sure that the galaxy would never forget the lesson they had taught. Dismiss someone at your peril, because the irrelevant might just become indispensable. The small might become giants, and those who knocked on your door might one day decide to kick it down. But they might also, if you're very lucky, choose to hold it open for others who come after them. That was humanity's gift. That was their revenge. That was their promise glowing in the skies for all to see, forever.